There is no way he just said this. A lifetime Miami Heat journalist has just called out the entirety of the Miami Heat front office. I'm here to break down brand new quotes that leave us with a lot of speculation about the relationships behind closed doors amongst the executives of the Miami Heat organization. We'll break down how it could be taking a toll on this Miami Heat organization as recent as right now in this offseason and how it could really affect them going forward for years to come. We'll break down all of that on this episode of Heat Digest. So let's get right to it and not waste any time breaking down, are there problems behind closed doors for Miami? Now, if you don't know what I'm alluding to here, it's the relationship between President Pat Riley and Mickey Arison and his son Nick Arison. Now, if you aren't aware, Mickey Arison is one of the main guys behind closed doors. He is the managing general partner for the Miami Heat organization. If you don't know, he was involved in Carnival Cruise Line, and he is a quadruple trillionaire. He has money that come out of his ears at this point. And in 2011, he rewarded his son, Nick Arison, with really the keys to this Miami Heat franchise and made him the CEO of this Miami Heat organization back in 2011. Now, Nick Arison, little idea if you don't know, he is the son of Mickey Arison, and he's only 42 or 43 years of age. He did go to the University of Duke, and he seems to be a brilliant human being when it comes to just knowledge in itself. And he worked his way through this Miami Heat organization. But right now, and since 2011, he has been the boss of Pat Riley. He's been the boss of anyone involved in the Miami Heat organization in its entirety, and that's really not an exaggeration, and that's something that Dan Le Batard, the journalist that called out the entirety of the front office, that he mentioned, as well as a few other things that we're going to highlight, but it's very interesting. And Dan Le Batard would go on in this 70-second, 80-second clip, and he would bring up a lot of great points. One of them, in which he opened with, was the fact that a lot of people may just assume that things are all great and dandy behind closed doors, but in reality, it may not be that way in Miami. Just think about the idea that Pat Riley, someone who's been involved in the game of basketball for 50, 60 years up to this point, he's over the age of 80. He's been involved in the game of basketball for the vast majority of his life, whether it is as an executive, something in the front office, a position in the front office, I should say, a head coaching position, West Coast, East Coast, college, professional, whatever it is, Pat Riley has done it. And he has lived through the game of basketball, an entirety of a life in the game of basketball. And now, despite being as elderly and as knowledgeable and as experienced as he still has to answer to one who's literally half the age of himself in Nick Arison, who's, again, just in his early 40s, around 42 or 43 years of age. Now, again, this will be tagged down below if you'd like to listen and watch on this minute and 39-second clip of Dan Le Batard from this morning on his show, where he really spills the beans, if you'd like to say, as this, I feel like, started an entire heat wave of speculation and conversation surrounding this Miami Heat organization, specifically the front office, and how things are really behind closed doors in the relationship aspect between these three individuals. Now, you could obviously assume that Mickey Arison and Nick Arison are fine and dandy. That's father and son. They are wildly successful. But Pat Riley, being as old as he is, being as knowledgeable and as experienced as he is, if he decides he wants to go out there and win right now, and Nick Arison feels like he'd rather hold on to draft picks and young assets in the sense of players like Jaime Jaquez Jr., players like Nikola Jovic, and these Khalil Wares, and these other young pieces that they have on this Miami Heat organization, rather than moving all of them for a substantial aging piece like Kevin Durant and others. Maybe there's a bit of butting heads behind closed doors, and which is resulting not only in this not working in the idea of trying to bring assets to Miami, but also just in the idea of two guys that have to be able to work together. You have the CEO and the president of basketball operations. If those two guys don't really see eye to eye, it's going to be very hard to even expect things to even semi-work out, let alone to be a championship contender in such a daunting league like the NBA. Now, we're going to cite a few things. The first one, again, going back to this quote, if you guys would like to see it, it's tagged down in the description. Dan Le Batard goes on to mention that Pat Riley, he has a boss in Miami. Like, yes, Pat Riley is the godfather, and a lot of people like to think because of who he is and the life he has lived in the game of basketball, specifically on the professional level, that he really has any and all leeway. I mean, there's not really any guidelines for him, and he doesn't have a boss. That's not the case. Nick Arison is Pat Riley's boss, and I thought that was really, really heavy and something blunt that Dan Le Batard had brought up in that video. And I went and did some research, and this article came up from the one and only Brian Windhorst, one of the most recognizable, incredible names that cover the game of basketball at any level. And this is titled Nick Arison Climbs Ladder, Named Heat CEO. And this was written back in April of 2011 when it actually happened. Then you have pictured Mickey and Nick Arison. And at the very bottom, in the closing sentence of the little four sentences that we have here to cite, it's just a very interesting quote I have to lead in because it's very small. Heat President Pat Riley made sure to publicly thank Nick Arison, who he described as, quote, my future boss. And that's the end of the quote from Pat Riley. And it's just another substantial thing, something you don't normally hear from Pat Riley in any context, in any formality. Him accepting and really just admitting to not being the one head honcho guy, being the guy at the top that doesn't take any, or doesn't have to answer any questions, doesn't have to bend his ways by anyone's standards because he's the guy. That is not the case in Miami. At least it may not be behind closed doors, and it could result in just a problem, a situation, a mix of bad blood, like we possibly could compare to of Jimmy Butler and Pat Riley in that relationship that we saw crumble and burn down last season before the midway point of the last regular season. And back to acknowledge the credibility of Pat Riley and how long he's been in the game of basketball. This is a breakdown, and it's not even as in-depth as it probably should be. Remember, Pat Riley is in the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. That is not something they just give away. And he had multiple careers in which you could have given him that Hall of Fame inductee, whether it was as a head coach, whether it was as an executive, whether as a player would be a bit of a stretch. But if you go with 1, 2, and 3 here, it is undeniable. If you take just as a head coach, if you take just as an executive, he has been phenomenal in his job and at his job description every single time he's put to the test. Now, I'm going to tag this article down below. It is from a football website. It's kind of weird. It worked out. The reason I'm using this is because it gives me an exact quote down below from the Dan Le Batard show that we were citing earlier, this actual screenshot. So again, here's an actual quote from Dan Le Batard as well, tagged down below if you want to see it. Arison, who became CEO in 2011, may be more inclined toward a long-term vision, including a focus on developing young players or young talent and building through the draft. This difference in priorities could shape the Heat's direction as they look to remain contenders in a competitive league. Le Batard pointed out, quote, I don't know if Nick would rather have the draft picks or not, and I don't know what kind of tension it might cause, before adding, quote, how do you imagine Pat Riley feels about responding to Nick Arison, who used to be a ball boy? And that is the end of the quote, from one of the many quotes from Dan Le Batard, and he's not necessarily wrong. Back to the idea of all the accolades that one has compared to the other, compared to the idea that Pat's been doing this longer than Nick Arison. He's obviously been alive for nearly 2 times as long as Nick Arison. It's a very interesting dynamic to say at the absolute least, whether or not there's actually a fire behind closed doors and these two are butting heads and not seeing eye to eye. No one can necessarily confirm nor deny. But if this speculation gets out of hands and this heat wave reaches Miami and there are questions asked in these press conferences or in these training camp situations where Eric Spoelstra could be questioned, as well as possibly Pat Riley and other executives in the front office, just look for things to trickle out, little bits and pieces of information from people like Alonzo Mourning and others that are involved in this Miami Heat organization that could just give any journalist or anyone covering this Miami Heat organization to any degree the idea to run with that this is simply not working, because we know with Pat Riley's age and his want to get another championship, it doesn't seem like he's going anywhere else outside of Miami to get that job done. It looks like he's going to sail out into the sunset in Miami, and he's going to try to do it and be successful in doing so and winning another championship before, well, time is too late. Let me know down below what your overall opinions are on this entire idea of possibly having bridges burned behind closed doors amongst the executives in Miami. And I will see you guys on the next episode of Heat Digest.